yes, Midoriya, use your full power. You know the rules, and so do I. Let me know what you thought about this week's episode of My Hero Academia down in the comment section down below, and you will be read out in next week's show. While you're there, be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the button, do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube has increased this scary place to small content creators. Support your local small content creator today. It will do them a power of good. Now, on to the review. And as always, when it comes to doing these reviews, we start out with the positives, and just to start off with what I feel is ultimately a fairly minor thing, I have to say that I really do dig Midoriya's new costume. It cuts a terribly imposing and sinister figure, one which I'm hesitant to say looks badass, but still it does create this rather compelling look to him that really does show just, well, where we are right now within the story. We are in the grim, dark, slightly miserable part of the story, so his costume takes on a slightly more dark and sinister look to it. Granted, from his point of view, he isn't really trying to be an edgelord, or isn't trying to be dark and sinister, or anything like that. From his point of view, it really is just the result of wear and tear, with most of the damage being done from his previous fight a few episodes ago, but still, I genuinely do think that it does look really imposing, and it does look terribly cool, even if it is in slightly a 90s extreme kind of cool. But hey, I am of that era, so that kind of stuff will always tickle my fancy. Though I will say that one of the things that I do like about it is just how much it breaks his silhouette. This is best illustrated in that moment where he's handing Muscular over to the authorities and he's within that mist, and for a brief second it's kind of hard to tell that it really is him because of just how different that he looks. Whilst, yeah, I don't think he went out of his way to look quite as sinister or mysterious as he does do, I think that at this point he is well aware that he needs to do as much as he can do to make himself look as least as much like himself as possible. And I like the fact that the costume itself bears so many references to his mentors and his past adventures. Of course, as we see in this episode, he gets the cape from Gran Torino. This is something that I thought was going to be a bit more of a darker thing when I first saw him wearing it in the intro sequence. I thought that Gran Torino was going to die or something like that, and Midoriya was going to essentially take up the mantle and take his cape to try and as a tribute to him, in honour of him, to avenge him, but it isn't. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with that, but, you know, I like the fact that Inko incorporates something from him. Of course, the overall design itself is inspired by All Might and All Might's hairstyle when you got to the hood thing that Midoriya wears, and overall it still has Midoriya's own design, that that green bunny rabbit kind of look that it has to it, which altogether shows that whilst he is a student of Torino's and of All Might's, and whilst they may have inspired him, the overall design of it does show that it is still Midoriya at the end of the day. Whilst he is paying tribute to them, he is his own hero, and he is his own person, and the way that it looks now is showing furthermore that he's defining himself as a hero. And of course, within this episode, we do get the little compression band things that we had seen previously in the first movie. So they're back, or more reasonably now, they are properly canon. Most of that movie isn't canon, apart from something that we will discuss in due course when that comes into the story. But, you know, it's interesting to actually see it. And the fact they don't make an explicit reference to Militia's shield or David's shield or anything like that, it feels a bit weird, but I think that's who the hinting is behind it, even though it's not overt. So, you know, fair enough. I mean, the fact that we know what that's going to be a discussion for a whole other time, but we'll move on. The sequence that we got before the opening fight was interesting. It helped give us a better understanding as to how this world is falling apart, or more specifically how Japan in this world is falling apart, as it's now at a point where people are practically breaking off into their own sub-societies and communes and cutting themselves off from the wider world in an attempt to protect themselves, which is understandable, as much of what we see of the wider world right now just seems to be like just a massive war zone, which I'm not going to say anything more on that because that feels like a sensitive topic, but it does, within this world and within this program, give us an insight as to just how things are really just falling apart. They haven't fallen yet. It feels like we're still in this process of decay and collapse. We haven't had this sharp snapping moment as I worried that we would have done when I realised this kind of stuff was starting to come down the pipeline. We're seeing a society which is questioning the role of heroes more and more, and to a wider point it seems to be questioning what we understand as civilized society, quote-unquote civilized society, even more. It seems to be wanting to redefine itself as something else, even if for some of them it doesn't really seem to be clear as to what they're defining themselves as. What we're seeing here is a world that's in transition and in flux, and feels as though it's descending to almost a primal, tribal, feudalistic, whatever form of way you want to describe it, and it's fascinating to see for however little that we end up seeing of it. The main focus, of course, within that opening half is the fight sequence we get with Muscular, aka Bakugo's uncle. And to actually see him back properly now and actually doing his thing is great. There is a part of me that worried that when we saw him a few episodes back that was almost going to be it, that it was just going to be effectively a walk-on cameo and nothing more, and maybe we'd see him captured as part of some wider montage, but we don't get that. We do get to see him again. I do wish that whole fight sequence had gone a little bit longer, though, as I feel that given the importance of that fight, and the thematic importance of that fight furthermore, that it really should have been longer. I'm not sure I'd dedicate an entire episode to it, but I feel that needed to have a little bit more to it, as that was Midoriya's first true fight. That was the first time that he really went to town in any kind of villain with his quirk, and to see them both now back together again, reunited on the battlefield, I feel that should have been more of a thing than it was. However, with that said, I do respect the fact that it is as short as it is, because that whole fight acts as a benchmark to show how Midoriya has evolved. Not just in terms of raw power, but also his skills and understanding of what it takes to be a hero. He knows exactly what to do to get the best result. This is not like the first time where he fought Muscular, where he was just going all out and leaving himself borderline crippled by the end of it. He knows exactly what he needs to do. He knows how to control his power. He hasn't gone full power, as the title would suggest, but he's using as much power as he needs to, and he's getting the results that he needs. This whole episode itself is setting up the fact of how much Midoriya has evolved and changed, which I'll get into in just a moment. And towards the end of the episode, we get the scene with Inko Midoriya, which was honestly touching, and I totally understand why she feels the way that she does. Probably more profoundly now, given the passage of time. I will be honest, had I been watching this as a teenager, I might not have really appreciated her point of view quite as much as I would do now, because let's face it, when you have some similar kind of objections from the parent of the hero or spouse of the hero for doing a certain thing, there's a part of you that always rolls your eyes. But then as you start to get older and see things from their point of view, you go, yeah, I understand that. I understand why she doesn't want her child to endanger himself in the way that she's worried about. Yeah, I totally understand that now. But within that scene, to just go back to a previous point, it shows just how much Midoriya has truly matured over the course of the past few months. He's making all the right calls, even if they are ones that are going to be personally difficult for him. He knows exactly what he needs to do now. He knows exactly how much power that he needs to give into any situation. And for him, here and now, he feels that the best course of action that he can take is to just cut himself off from his family and his friend circle and just dedicate himself full time to being a hero, in a way which, let's be honest, had things gone well for him and the League of Villains stuff never come around, I don't think he ever would have had to do. Like, had he just gone through the next 2 or 3 years of hero school and at the end of it got a job as a hero, I don't think he would have had to have dedicated himself to being a hero quite as much in this, but hey ho, that is a discussion and a what if for a whole other era. I feel that just to plant a flag here and now, this episode is great. It is not one of the greatest that has ever been, and it's not one of the greatest of this season, but it shows everything that it needs to do perfectly. It is setting the stage for things to come in a less ostentatious and less showy way. This isn't the equivalent of a shadowy figure appearing at the back of the scene towards the end of the episode going, yes, everything's going according to plan. And then all the reactors and all the commentators go, ooh, who's this new villain? We didn't get anything like that. This is setting the stage from a purely emotional and thematic point of view, in a way which I feel that some might turn around and call it filler, because it's not directly dealing with the task at hand, but it is because it's developing our character furthermore. However, that is a rant for a whole other time. Speaking of negative aspects, at this point we do get into the negatives, but this is one of those times where, I'll be honest with you, dear listener, it's really hard to talk about negatives for this episode, because I really don't think that there are any. And I can't just turn around and say there are no negatives, because for one, that feels professionally unprofessional, but it also just ends up feeling like, well, it doesn't feel right, because there's always something that does kind of niggle at the back of my mind, even if at times it is fairly minor. As I said previously, I feel that the fight with Muscular should have gone on longer. Not due to the desire for spectacle or seeing Midoriya using his new powers, despite the fact all that stuff I think was brilliantly well animated for the most part, especially that final shot that we get with Midoriya having finished off Muscular. You know, all that stuff, animation, top notch, character design, top notch. I just wish it had gone on for a little bit longer, because, like I say, it has greater narrative importance, and I think that a lot of people are really going to give it credit for. Again, I understand why it's as short as it is, because it's designed as a benchmark. It's designed to show us just how much Midoriya has grown, both in terms of his raw power, but also in terms of his maturity as far as being a hero is concerned. But at the same time, there's always going to be that part in the back of my mind thinking, well, this was his first true major villain fight, so the fact that we're treating it, I wouldn't say flippantly, but we aren't dedicating as much time as I think that it would have been given in any other television program, or in, to be honest, a manga, because of the source material, just kind of feels a little bit weird to me. But at the same time, the fact that they aren't dedicating as much time to it is something that also does, I have to give credit to, and I have to give kudos and grazies to, because let's be honest, there are other programs that probably wouldn't have just dedicated an entire episode to this. They'd have dedicated an entire mini arc to it, and I think that would have been far too much given the end result of it and what it needed to be. Beyond that, again, it's hard for me to really drill into the negatives for this one, because I don't really think that there are any, because this episode does everything that it needs to do, and that's just about it. It's not going out of its way to set up storylines for things further down the line. The only things it is setting up is things that are to develop our main character. If we are to go into nitpicks, I think that the whole quirk hero card stuff that we see during the episode, you know, the thing of where it zooms in on a character and it tells us their name and where they're from and their quirk, I think that a lot of that could have been cut in this week's episode, particularly towards the end. By the end of it, it just felt wholly pointless and incredibly redundant. I don't see the point in doing the whole, this is such and such, they're from such and such, and their quirk is this, when their only contribution to the episode is to point up into the air and go, what's that? Like, I don't need to know who Mr. Smith is, or what his quirk is, or what school he studies at, when that's all he's going to be doing. It feels wholly redundant and pointless. Granted, if you were to cut that stuff out, it wouldn't really change that much in the episode. It just might make a couple scenes maybe 10 seconds longer, but even still, like, what's the point towards the end of it? It just feels a little bit redundant. And I know that in the manga it's probably just like a literal thing that's just printed on the thing, and it only takes about as long as it takes you to read it, should you choose to read it. But in this you don't really get the option of it. You got President Mike coming in saying, here's Mr. Smith from What's It High School, 3rd year, his quirk is that. Oh, I can't wait to see what quirk he's going to do. I can't wait to see what his contribution to the events is. And he's gone. Oh, okay, well, fair enough. Like I say, this episode isn't really to go into the overview, I should say. This episode is good. It's fantastic. It does everything that it needs to do. Granted, a lot of that is in the most mechanical way possible. It crosses the line, it gets everything done, and it does it with flair and understanding and maturity that I think that this program needs, and this program often shows itself. The only problems I have with it are ultimately minor things, really are just matter of taste kind of things. There's nothing about it which really rubs me the wrong way. Title, quirky card stuff aside, the episode is great. I don't think anyone's going to really say this is the best episode of My Hero Academia ever, but given what it needs to do, it does it, and it does it perfectly. With all that said and done, let's get into Comment Corner! Okay, now it's time for Comment Corner. Only one comment this week, and it comes from X1, who says, I honestly enjoyed this week's episode quite a lot. I like the fact that we are learning more about One for All, even if it feels like it feels like a lot to take in one go. But then I watched these late, so that probably doesn't help. Thank you for your comment. Of course, they are referring to last week's episode when we had what can best be described as a bit of an info dump upon the history of One for All and the other quirk users within it and all that kind of malarkey. It was a lot to take in, I will admit. It was great to learn a lot more about it. As I say in the episode review last week, I am still in two minds as to whether or not that was the best way to deliver it, but at the end of the day, we learned everything that we needed to, and that is further developed this week when we see another one of the quirks that Midoriya has in his repertoire. I was going to make a joke about that, but I think I'll save it for another time. But, you know, it is fascinating to learn a little bit more about these things. I'll be honest, on the one hand, I want to learn more about it, and learn more about One for All and that. On the other hand of it, there's a part of me that doesn't want to learn anything more of it and is kind of happy to keep some of it just ambiguous. But on the other hand, there's a part of me that wants to learn as much as possible, but doesn't really want to learn about it all in one go. Like, it's weird how all these things line up. But still, thank you for your comment. And if you'd like to leave a comment down below, well, you can do so. Just go in the comment section. Let me know what you thought about the episode. Let me know about your feelings of My Hero Academia as we go on. I think we're now into our final 6 or so episodes before this season comes through. So we've got another 6 weeks and then the season's done. And we're probably not going to see My Hero Academia again for another year. But we'll soon see about that. Anyway, thank you all for listening, and see you next time. Goodbye! Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!